Hey everybody, how's it going? Nexy is here bringing you guys another nostalgic video. We are going down memory lane today with 5 iconic Diablo 2 unique items, which also have a Diablo 1 past. So this is all going to be about the days before powerful rune words. Let's get straight to it here, with the first one being the Stormshield. So before access to rune words like Spirit Monarch, Paladin Spirit, or even powerful uniques like Homunculus or Herald of Zakarum, we basically just had to rely on a Stormshield. The Stormshield was so good, especially for hardcore players, because of its 35% damage reduction. And we also saw this a lot on Barbarians with the iconic Grandfather weapon. So the Stormshield was really good early on in Diablo 2's expansion, unfortunately overshadowed by powerful uniques and rune words later on in 1.10. Now, in Diablo 1, it also had a great history. It was the best shield choice for warriors with the iconic King's Sword of Haste. So if you were a warrior, you would probably get a Storm Shield duplicated often across all warrior players on multiplayer Diablo. So it did have a great history in Diablo 1, known as the best shield choice, and it did have a great history in Diablo 2 up until 1.10. It's still a quite good shield now, it's just it does get overshadowed pretty quickly once you make that Spirit Monarch or, the Herald of Zakarum drops for you or whatever. So generally, still a good shield, but not as popular as you would think now. The next unique also falls in a similar standpoint, which is the Wind Force, where it was the best rogue weapon in Diablo 1, mainly for its knockback in addition to its high damage. The knockback is such a big deal in Diablo 1 because of the way walking and pathing worked. You would actually walk on pallets or little squares, and you couldn't run away as well as you could in Diablo 2. So because of that reason, keeping monsters away from you with knockback was a huge boost in survivability, in addition to its high damage as I mentioned. So the Wind Force was one of the most duplicated weapons for sure in the history of Diablo, simply because it was the best rogue weapon. And on top of that, going into Diablo 2 early on in its expansion, it was also the best bow for Amazons, and if you wanted to go with a Baraiza, you could do that too for piercing back before piercing and guided arrow were nerfed, but generally the Wind Force was the best bow. It's even still one of the best choices today. It's just most players prefer to go with a Faith Grand Matron bow once they have access to it, but generally Wind Force was an iconic Amazon weapon in early Diablo 2, and it was the rogue weapon in Diablo 1. The next one we have here is the Grandfather. This one is more iconic in Diablo 2 than it is in Diablo 1, but it did definitely have its place regardless. So similar to the Wind Force and the Stormshield, the Grandfather kind of lost its value once powerful rune words came in, like Breath of the Dying, or Grieve, or Last Wish, or even Immortal King's full set. But before those days, we had the Grandfather for our barbarian friends. It was one of the most highest damaged weapons out there, and it went well with a Stormshield early on. As I did mention, no powerful rune words yet, so the Grandfather was extremely good. Now, it also did originate from Diablo 1, but it also was the best two-hander in Diablo 1, if I remember correctly. Most warriors did run King's Sword of Haste with the Stormshield. It was just better overall for survivability. Two-handers weren't that viable. But if you wanted to be different, you wanted to run a two-handed weapon, the Grandfather was generally the choice to go. So overall, the Grandfather has a great history in Diablo and Diablo 2. It's just now it's overshadowed because of rune words. But generally, most of you, especially barbarian players early on, will remember this weapon. Next, we have Harlequin Crest. This one is different from the first three because it's still actually a good weapon, or sorry, not a weapon, a helmet. What am I talking about? I've covered a shield and 2 weapons, so I'm getting confused. But generally, the Harlequin Crest, it was a lot better early on, just like the other uniques. It was iconic. It still is iconic. Anyone that played a Hammerden, anyone that played a Magic Find Source, really any character remembers a Shaco. Now, no one really calls it a Harlequin Crest. I don't know why. People call it a Shaco, so do I, but basically the Shaco, it's still good today. The Magic Find, it's iconic for that reason, but generally it's a little bit more competitive compared to Griffin's Eye or Rare Circlets with skills and hit recovery and casting on it and resistances and whatever else you can get to make it a ridiculous helmet. But generally there are a lot more competitive helmets out there, like Crown of Ages as well. But the Shaco can still hold its own, especially early on if your main goal is magic finding. Now in Diablo 1, that's where I want to get into, because most people don't remember the Harlequin Crest Shaco in Diablo 1. It was a single player quest from Ogden's Sign. When you turned it in, you would get the unidentified cap, and it would be the Harlequin Crest, and it was a really good helmet back then, especially because it was single player. On multiplayer, I'm pretty sure the quest did not exist. A lot of quests were removed in multiplayer, and I think Ogden's Sign was one of them. But on top of that, even if it was a quest, it wouldn't really be remembered anyway, I think, because most people were duplicating the best items like Wind Force and Stormshield, Godly Plate of the Whale, so it really never would have been the best helmet in the first place.
May the spirit of Arcane protect me.
And finally, we have the Arcane's Valor. The Arcane's Valor is one of my ultimate favorite items in the entire Diablo franchise, and that's because of its long history in Diablo 1. So in Diablo 2, it was one of the best armors, similar to the Grandfather, the Wind Force, and the Stormshield, before the days of runewords like Enigma and Chains of Honor and Fortitude, and in some cases like the Skin of the Viper Magi. It was one of the best armors in the game for its high defensive properties, in addition to its skill, and the life boost was really big as well back then, but then it got nerfed big time. So after the Arcane's Valor nerfs, it kind of dropped in popularity, and then also with the introduction of the runewords I mentioned, it just pretty much died off. But in Diablo 1, it was a very unique quest item. It was I would say one of the most memorable items in Diablo 1. Sure, we remember things like Stormshield or Godly Plate of the Whale, but I think when it came to uniques, I think Arcane's Valor is up there, at least for me, mainly because of its quest. The Arcane's Valor quest was amazing. It was all about a very specific lore character. I don't know if you guys know the lore of Arcane, but he did some great things in the history of Diablo. While we did not learn most of that in the early stages of Diablo 1, later on if you read the books and stuff, and to date we have the internet where we can look up all the history and lore of Diablo, we will come to know who Arcane is. But mostly for the history of us, where we were kids and we played the quest line, it was really cool hearing the story of Arcane and how he hid his armor away and only the most chosen, the most good of heroes could find it. We find that armor, and then when we picked it up after completing the quest, we would get that unique, iconic voice line whenever we picked up the armor. So yeah, I think it's no surprise that the Arcane's Valor is one of my most favorites, not only from the flavor of the lore and the history behind it, but even on top of that, we also have the amazing quest line, the unique voice line whenever you picked it up, but it was also a really good armor early on in the game. First of all, it was one of the most guaranteed armors to change your appearance. Back in Diablo, only certain armors would change your character's appearance, and the Arcane's Valor wasn't one of the earliest to do that, but it was also really good for survivability with the minus damage from enemies and the vitality and the hit recovery. It was just so powerful early on, and if you were lucky enough to get the quest, it was a big boost. So overall, nothing bad about Arcane's Valor. It was just memorable to me. It might be different for some of you guys, but for me, it was one of the most iconic Diablo 2 items that had a history in Diablo 1. So I hope overall this was a great lesson to you guys about some of the items, or even just great nostalgia. Let me know what you guys thought about the video. If you want to see more different videos, don't be afraid to leave any comments down below. Thank you so much, as always, for tuning in, and I'll hopefully see you on my next videos. Bye, guys.